Good morning, everyone, and thank you for making time this morning. In an insurance agency, your most valuable asset walks out the door every evening. Your client relationships, your book of business, your reputation. And every decision you make as a leader either protects that asset or puts it at risk. So today, we're not going to have an IT presentation and we're not going to have a fear based talk. Today, we're going to have a leadership conversation about protecting the enterprise value of your agency. Because today, AI and data sit directly in the lane of client trust, carrier relationships, regulatory compliance, and the long term valuation of the book of business that you've spent years building. If you own, partner in, or lead an independent insurance agency, this affects you, not theoretically, but operationally and right now. Now, here's what we're going to walk through. What's actually happening with your agency today? We're also going to talk about what's actually happening with AI in the insurance industry, what this quietly costs your agency in revenue, reputation, and client retention, where the biggest missed opportunity is hiding inside your operation, what you actually control as an agency leader, and how to turn this risk into conversation and growth. Now, at the executive level, this matters for one reason. Technology risk is now enterprise risk, and it affects your E&O exposure, it affects your carrier appointments, and it affects your ability to recruit and retain top producers. It also affects the valuation of your agency when the time comes for a sale, a merger, or a secession. Now, AI is the most disruptive force in the insurance industry. It is the most disruptive force we've seen since online comparative rating, and everyone remembers when that was. But it's not because it's flashy, but because it accelerates everything. It accelerates underwriting, it accelerates claims processing, it accelerates client communication, it accelerates prospecting and renewal workflows. But unfortunately, it also accelerates the attacks that are increasingly targeting insurance agency. And here's something that should absolutely get your attention. AI has reduced the time it takes a criminal to build a convincing targeted attack campaign from 16 hours to roughly 5 minutes. And AI generated phishing emails now achieve a click rate, that's a successful click rate of 54%. Now compare that to 12% last year for traditional attacks. That is not that's not a technology problem. That is an agency operations problem. Insurance agencies sit at the intersection of highly sensitive data and financial transactions. You hold client social security numbers, financial statements, health histories, and property records. You process premium payments and manage policy changes that affect most people's important assets. And when AI increases the speed of operations in a system built around that kind of sensitive data, both efficiency and vulnerability increase simultaneously. If leaders don't intentionally govern that speed, the agency absorbs that risk by default. Now, attacks targeting agencies like yours are rising, and the sophistication is increasing rapidly. We've seen business email compromise attacks impersonating agency principals to redirect premium payments. And that's called a business email compromise. And those attacks alone resulted in more than $2.7 billion in reported losses in 2024. And the average loss per incident now exceeds six figures. We've also seen ransomware encrypt client management systems such as Applied or Vertafore, um, locking your agency out of their entire book of business. When a ransomware attack succeeds today, the average damage is about $1.18 million. We've seen credential theft through agency management portals expose PII to bad actors. And in just the first half of 2025 alone, 1.8 billion credentials were compromised globally. And when I say that, These are sites that look like carrier sites that someone else put credentials into. Now, independent agencies are specifically targeted because they hold large amounts of sensitive client data, often with far less security infrastructure than the carriers that they represent. Now, why does this matter specifically to your agency? Because insurance agency operations are predictable. Renewal cycles are predictable, commission cycles are predictable, and premium payment timing is predictable. Open enrollment sessions are predictable. Everyone usually knows when those occur. And predictability, that makes you targetable. Now, again, this isn't about fear, it's about understanding the incentives and aligning your protection accordingly. So, the leadership question here becomes, are you ready? Not tool ready, strategy ready. Is your agency management system, let's say that your TAM, your Epic, your Vertifor, let's say it went down tomorrow. Do you have a documented continuity plan for how you're going to get back up? If a producer receives a phone call that sounds exactly like your carrier rep because it's an AI cloned voice, is there a verification process in place that would catch that? If a former employee still had access to your CRM or your client portal, would you actually know that? If a vendor, your comparative rater for say, or your document management system, or even your telephony provider got breached, who leads the response for your side? Now, the why is simple. Insurance agencies operate on trust. And when a client's data is exposed through your agency, that trust breaks, and it breaks fast. And executive clarity can shorten that chaos. Lack of clarity extends the chaos. So if you store client data, process premium payments, or transmit personally identifiable information electronically, you're on the radar. Insurance agencies do all of those every single day. You integrate with carrier portals, agency management systems, comparative raters, document storage platforms, e-signature tools, and third-party marketing platforms. And here's where most agencies are genuinely exposed. Now, according to the World Economic Forum, 41% of companies that experienced a breach in 2024 were hit through a third party vendor, not through their own staff. So while you may have strong internal habits, your agency management vendor, your telephony provider, or your marketing automation platform may have weak controls. And if they do, you actually inherit that vulnerability. And here's what makes agencies particularly exposed right now. Carriers are beginning to audit agency security posture as part of the appointment review. So your posture is becoming a business relationship issue, not just a compliance issue. Now, at the executive level, vendor oversight is no longer an IT task. It is a risk governance function, and it lands with leadership. At the same time, if you're not thinking about how to use AI to improve agency operations, your competitors already are. And AI is being used today inside independent agencies to automate renewal outreach, reduce the manual touch points that eat up your producer time, and it's being used to generate personalized client communications at scale. It's being used to surface cross sell and upsell opportunities from existing book of businesses that would otherwise go unnoticed. Now, why does that matter? Because clients notice responsiveness, carriers notice retention rates, and buyers notice revenue per employee. All of our agencies want to round out all of our accounts, and AI is being used to do that. The agency's positioning for acquisition or the agencies that are positioning for acquisition or are talking about are talking about preparation planning over the next 3 to 5 years are the ones building operational maturity right now. Apparently, I can't talk all of a sudden. Apologies. A well run technology enabled agency commands a higher multiple. A reactive, paper heavy operation does not. And we all know the insurance agency that is paper heavy right now because you're thinking about it and you've seen it before. Now, doing nothing, it actually costs you, and not just in breach scenarios, but in daily operational drag. Revenue leaks through manual renewal processes that let accounts slip to competitors. Reputation damage that happens fast when client data is exposed. In a relationship driven industry like insurance, that damage can be permanent. The average cost of a data breach in the United States now exceeds $9 million dollars. And for a small agency, you just don't recover from that. Research shows that a significant number of small businesses that experience a major breach do not survive in the following 2 years. And regulatory exposure is real, and it keeps growing every day. The number of organizations paying regulatory fines over $50,000 increased by nearly 23% in 2025 alone. State insurance regulators are increasingly active on data security, and many agency owners aren't even aware of what triggers a notification obligation or a fine. Talent loss. Top producers are going to evaluate the quality of the tools that they work with. And agencies running outdated, clunky systems struggle to attract the next generation talent. And I can tell you that in insurance, we are always struggling to hire new and younger people. And they're going to look for the next generation in software. And then we talk about client churn. When a client experiences poor service driven by technology failure, they call another agent. Now, the why for you is margin protection. In an agency, small inefficiencies compound quickly across your book. Small security gaps become major liabilities. Leaders protect margin by reducing friction and preventing avoidable loss. So let's talk about what you, as an agency leader, actually control. And let me separate what is out of your hands from what is completely within your authority. You do not control whether criminals target insurance agencies this quarter. You do not control how convincing an AI cloned voice of your carrier rep becomes. And I say that, and it sounds like it is science fiction. But I can tell you that in 2025 alone, voice AI cloned voices and AI cloned voice breaches increased by 444%. So that is becoming more and more of a problem. You also don't control what vulnerabilities exist in your carrier platform infrastructure. And you do not control when a major industry data event affects the agencies around you. And those are real. Everything I just talked about is real, and they're coming, and they will continue to come. But you do control your strategy. You control whether your agency has a formal policy for how staff uses AI tools in client facing and administrative workflows. You control whether access to your agency management system and your client portals is audited, especially for former producers, CSRs, and vendors. You control whether your vendor agreements include data security requirements and clear breach notification obligations. And you control whether financial transactions and banking changes require a secondary verification step, including phone requests that sound completely legitimate. And the why is accountability. Carriers, regulators, and E&O underwriters all evaluate whether agency leadership exercise reasonable oversight. Oversight is defensible, neglect is not. But you also control how proactive your agency is and who you trust as your technology strategy partner. Proactive agencies reduce dwell time. That's the gap between when an attacker gains access and when you detect it. In small business environments, average dwell time before detection can stretch to weeks. And during that window, client data is quietly being exfiltrated. And in 2025, data theft is now involved in 40% of major claims, and that's up from 25% the year before. The speed at which you respond when something does happen determines whether it becomes a contained incident or a public event that ends carrier relationships and client trust. Now, at the leadership level, proactive posture signals to carriers, E&O underwriters, and potential buyers that this agency is managed with discipline. And here's what I want you to take away from this slide. Again, this is not a technology conversation. Technology is the mechanism, yes, but what we're really talking about is client trust, carrier relationships, E&O exposure, and producer retention, and obviously all of that equals agency valuation. Every one of those things is a principal level responsibility, and every one of them is affected by how well your agency's risk posture is governed. So, this conversation today is a business growth conversation. AI can automate renewal touch points, which means producers spend more time selling and less time chasing paperwork. AI can surface cross sell opportunities in your existing book, which means more revenue from clients you already have. AI can improve client communication at scale, which means better retention without adding headcount. And a strong documented security posture is now directly tied to agency valuation. Buyers and perpetuation partners perform technology due diligence. And an agency with documented controls, clean practices, and a governance structure commands a better multiple than one that doesn't. Now, the why is enterprise value. You built this book of business, and protecting it and growing that value is a principal level priority. And technology strategy is now part of that equation. Leverage AI as your strategic edge. Use it to reduce friction in renewal workflows and client communication. Use it to identify cross sell and upsell opportunities buried in your existing book. Use it to improve prospecting efficiencies and reduce the time between lead and quote. But pair every AI adoption with governance. Define what tools producers and CSRs can use, and define what client data can touch those tools. Define who is accountable when something goes wrong, because speed without control is simply fast exposure. The agencies that get this right will be the ones that retain the best producers, hold the strongest carrier relationships, and command the highest valuations when it comes time for a transaction or succession. So, how do you actually turn this into growth? Well, you're going to start with clarity. You can't protect what you can't see. Conduct an external exposure assessment, and this shows you what is already visible to attackers: leaked credentials, exposed data, forgotten vendor accounts, right? So before you have a single internal conversation, conduct this type of assessment. Review your vendor access and permissions. Map who has access to your agency management system and client data, and whether any of that access is broader than it needs to be, right? Are you auditing that on a yearly basis? Map operational friction inside your agency. Where are producers and CSRs working around technology rather than with it? That friction is a cost and often a risk. Then identify where AI can safely improve efficiency, starting with the workflows that are costing you the most time and the most client touch points. Again, the why is focus. Growth rarely comes from dozens of initiatives. It comes from a handful of disciplined decisions executed consistently. And when you reduce exposure and reduce operational friction at the same time, something important happens in your agency. You stabilize the agency, you protect client trust, and you improve the producer experience. You strengthen your carrier relationships, and you build the kind of documented, audible governance that makes your agency attractive to buyers, carriers, and E&O underwriters. And that chain reaction, protection leading to performance, leading to growth, is why this conversation matters at the principal level. Over the next 12 months, expect continued pressure from small business email compromise, targeting agency financial operations. Expect AI generated phishing and AI cloned voice. And you're going to hear a lot of people say that in the upcoming year. And we are all familiar with phishing, but there's a new attack vector and it's called vishing, which is voice phishing, right? So it's AI cloned voice attacks. And they're going to become indistinguishable from legitimate carrier communications. Expect carrier security audits to become standard in all appointment reviews. Governance is becoming a competitive differentiator, not just a compliance checkbox. So let me ask you a direct question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it for your agency this year to reduce exposure, protect client trust, and position the agency for long-term growth or a future transaction? Now, if it's below a 7, the timing may not be right, and that's completely okay. Not every agency is in the same place. But if it's a 7 or above, I want to tell you exactly what I would do right now if I were sitting where you are. So on this slide, I would go to the link on this slide, citian.group/free scan, or scan the QR code that I put out here and run the free agency exposure assessment. Before I left this room, I would run that. That's going to tell me what most agency principals need to know. Now, most agency principals already know there's a gap. They're not lacking awareness. What they're missing is a clear picture of exactly where that gap is and what it looks like to an attacker right now. And this assessment gives you that picture in 10 minutes. And because you attended today's briefing, I'm going to give that to you at no cost. Now, it scans your dark web exposure, meaning any staff credentials that have already been leaked and are circulating online right now. It checks your external network for known vulnerabilities. It evaluates your DNS health, and it reviews your website for security gaps. There's no software to install, no IT team required, just a link, about 10 minutes, and a clear result. This is something that, as I said, because you watched today's briefing, this is something that most agencies pay up to $1,000 for. And today I'm going to offer that to you at no cost. But it will, maybe it costs you 10 minutes of your time. But here's what happens right after that. Once you see your results, you'll have something tangible. You'll have something most agency principals don't have. And that word is clarity. You'll know exactly what's exposed. You'll know exactly what the priority is. And if you want to talk through what it means for your specific agency, that's what the risk strategy session is for. No pressure, no sales pitch, just a focused conversation about what the results mean and what, if anything, makes sense as the next step. So here's my ask. Before you close this tab or you walk out of you walk out of your office today, scan that QR code or go to the link on the slide. Again, citian.group/free scan. 10 minutes, no cost, but real answers about your agency. You spent years building your book of business, and you deserve to know what's protecting it and what isn't. As always, I thank you so much for your time. We are always on and always ahead, and be absolutely kind to each other. Have a great day.